Hello and welcome to episode number 462 of the Plain Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, I'm back, and on this week's show, one airliner decides its nose gear is too good to use, one cargo carrier starts to thin out its aircraft, starting with the MD-11. That's fine by me, they're an ugly aircraft anyway. And one pilot decides that a licence isn't needed to fly his jet. In the military news this week, the Irish go all C-295 and the National Museum of the USAF hosts Air Power History Tours. And joining me this week, he's in the studio where it's less than 40 degrees Celsius. It's Matt Smith.
Yeah, it's not bad actually at the moment. We have a positively tolerable 25 today. It's not too bad at all. Ooh. I know, it's but then it is very grey, and if you're in the UK and on a Friday evening, you'll know it's been a very strange day weather-wise. It's very dark and it's very grey and just not very nice, really.
Now, Matt, you live just literally not less than
half a mile
from me that way, and I'm looking at my studio window here, and I'm seeing lots of dots of wet stuff on the window.
Oh no! I'm glad I bought everything inside. Oh dear.
Oh dear.
Lovely.
Just glad I washed the car earlier. Anyway,
right, okay.
Joining us as always again this week, he's back, our aficionado of all things British and Airways. It's, of course, Neville Bounds.
Yeah, no flying this week for me. Just driving around quite a lot for work. Yeah, well, it's been a bit quieter this week, I have to say, but next week it's going to be very full on. Not in the air, but on the road. So lots of driving next week and customer visits and what have you. But very pleased to be back on the show this week. Spent a couple of evenings this week editing some more footage from the Museum of Flight at East Fortune. And later on in the show, we'll be featuring the interview that Carlos did with Ian Brown, who's the curator there. A fascinating interview, and I'm really pleased that Ian was able to give us his time, because it's come out very well, I must say.
Well, it's good to have you on as always, Nev, and perhaps, hopefully, you'll be back in the air next week.
Well,
although at a flight level where you breathe oxygen.
Well, yes. I mean, rather than just staying at flight level 80, which is a bit
quite low,
sluggish,
isn't it? Yeah,
I must say, yes.
Yes, I did listen back to last week's show. I heard all about the fun you had, Nev.
Mind you, to be fair to the airline, I did get my compensation this week because it did go over a 3-hour delay. Not by much, though, I don't think. But and it was in my bank by yesterday, so that's a week and a bit to get some compensation.
Oh, good. That's good.
From Big Airways. So thank you very much.
Well, he's back again with us this week, and it's the person who seems to do an awful amount of work at the moment with the show in the background, looking after us guys at the minute, and is our newest member of the team. Welcome back. It's Nick Codling.
Good evening. Good to see you guys. How's everybody doing this week? It's good to be here.
All right, I think getting away with it. That's always been my motto. It's just like, how are you getting on this week? Well, I'm getting away with it, you know.
just be careful, Nick. Behind you there, you're
Armando's shoes.
No, nobody can do that.
Oh my word!
It's quite the unique badge he has there. But yeah, going to be. Yeah, we will be hearing from Armando, as Nick has alluded to there. No Armando with us, sadly, this week. But he is here in digital form, shall we say. He has put together a few reads for us. So he'll be giving his insight into the stories that he is covering, including some great military stories, as always.
So let's have a look who's joining us in the glorious chat room this evening. Let's have a look. God, I've missed you lot for the last 2 weeks. I'm not going to lie, especially after last week's... party. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Mazoos, hello to you. Our local listener, Mazoos, good to see you in there. Oscar as well. Oscar was in there nice and early. Richard Adams.
He's complaining about the weather the same as we are at the moment.
Richard's in there. We've got Lee Davies. Hello to you, Lee. Yes, I know, Lee. I've got the beer on the go. I've got the summer ale with peach. It's very nice indeed, I will say. Who else we got in there? Captain Cruz. Hello to you, Captain Cruz. Captain Cruz didn't like my comment on the DC or the MD-11, but I'm right in what I said. You know what? Everyone knows I'm right. It was an ugly aircraft. Anyway, Dirk S., hello to you as well. Good to see you in there this evening. Bill, hello to Bill. Good to see you in there, Bill. Hope you're having a nice evening. Hobby Time is also joining us this evening. Just scrolling down the list. Aaron P., hello to you, Aaron. And John Jester, our resident cargo king. John is in there. Good to see you in there. And let me scroll down. Mark Priestley. Hello to you, Mark. Good to see you in there as well in the chat room. And welcome to everyone who's joined us this evening. It's good to see you all in there. Don't forget, if you're listening to our glorious voices on a audio podcast, you can find out how stunning we all look as hosts. Over on YouTube. Just search on YouTube for Plain Talking UK. Don't forget to click subscribe and to click the bell icon to know when we are live, and you can obviously pop over and see just how beautiful we all are in full HD.
Okay,
for radio.
And yeah, absolutely, 100%. Shall we move on before I throw up everywhere?
Anyway, we've got tons to get through on the show this week, including that very special first part interview with over at the museum in Edinburgh. So we've got that coming up. We've also got Caption This. It's back this week. You lot have been very excited about the Caption This week. And it's time for some commercial news. And also, not forgetting as well, we've got the results of the book competition. Your chance to win a book. And hopefully Nev's got another one lined up for this week on the show. So your chance to win a book. So if everyone is ready,
indeed,
let's do some commercial news.
The captain has turned on the seatbelt light. Please take your seats and fasten your seatbelts.
So first story this week comes to us from aerotime.aero, and the headline, interesting one, this private jet captain had no valid pilot certificates when the Dassault Falcon crashed. There's quite an interesting picture of this, actually, minus landing gear. An investigation looking into why a Dassault Falcon 900EX private jet overran the runway during takeoff has found that the pilot in command did not hold any valid pilot certificates at the time of the accident. According to the National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, all the pilot in command certificates had been revoked by the Federal Aviation Authority 2 years prior to the crash due to his falsification of logbook entries and records.
What?
Oh, dear. On February the 13th, 2021, shortly before midday, the Falcon 900EX overran the end of the runway 28 right at Montgomery Gibbs Executive Airport, or Mike Yankee Foxtrot at San Diego, California. The Falcon was due to travel to Ellison Onzuki Kona International Airport at Keihole in Hawaii. However, the plane failed to take off, overran the departure end of the runway by about 315 feet and struck a beam which sheared off all three landing gear. The airplane slid an additional 230 feet and came to rest on gravel overrun pad, and the aircraft sustained substantial damage to the wings and fuselage, and the fuel tanks ruptured, but thankfully there was no fire. The report published by the NTSB this month said accompanying the pilot in command and first officer on board were two passengers and one flight attendant, neither of whom suffered injuries. The flight crew later stated that at rotation speed, the captain applied back pressure to the control yoke. However, the nose did not rotate to take off altitude. The captain attempted to rotate the aircraft one more time by relaxing the yoke, then pulling it back again with no change in the aircraft's attitude. He made a decision to reject the takeoff by retarding the thrust levers and applying maximum brakes, the report stated. A review performance of data indicated the flight crew attempted to take off with the aircraft at 2,975 pounds over the maximum takeoff weight and centre of gravity, close to the most forward limits, and an incorrect stabiliser trim setting. Well, he was doing quite well then at this point. The digital flight data recorder data indicated the captain attempted takeoff at a rotation speed 23 knots slower than the calculated rotation speed for the aircraft's maximum takeoff weight. Takeoff performance showed the departure runway was 575 feet shorter than the distance required for takeoff at the aircraft's weight, the NTSB explained in its report. Additionally, the pilot in command had never held a type rating for the accident aircraft and had started but not completed the training in the accident airplane before the accident happened. The captain stated he was employed directly by the owner of the aircraft and had previously flown other aircraft for the same owner. Well, I wonder if he's still doing that now. The first officer, who was also employed directly by the owner, had accumulated around 16 hours of flight experience in the aircraft type of and the aircraft was not authorised to operate as pilot in command. Well, the first officer wasn't allowed to operate as PIC. The NTSB determined the probable cause of the accident to be the flight crew's operation of the aircraft outside of the manufacturer's specified weight and balance limitations, with an improper trim setting, which resulted in the aircraft's inability to rotate during the attempted takeoff. Contributing to the accident was the captain's lack of proper certification and the crew's lack of flight experience and the aircraft's make and model. And due to COVID restrictions, the NTSB did not travel to the accident, and data was gathered by responding representatives from the FAA and the airplane manufacturer Dassault Aviation. Well, safe to say that if you don't know how to fly, you shouldn't really be flying the aircraft.
I'm sorry, I can't get my head around this. How does this happen? I mean, somebody somewhere has obviously dropped a ball somewhere, haven't they? I mean, somebody hasn't done their appropriate checks. I mean, surely you don't just take a person's word for it. You check everything out.
Well, you'd hope so. I mean, you have to remember as well, this isn't a small business jet. You know, the Falcon 900EX is a reasonably good-sized private jet. You know, this is... Well, what we were saying there, it's kind of like a half-sized 717.
That's a multi-engine aircraft, isn't it? And,
yeah.
He must have made a real hash of, I think he said a bad word, the hash of the takeoff calculations if he couldn't get a three-engine jet into the air based on the runway that he had available. But clearly, at the planning stage, he just didn't take account of all the raw data that he should have done, and let alone the fact that he's not licensed to fly the aircraft. That's almost a secondary point, isn't it, really? Yeah, I think there's going to be some repercussions over this, definitely.
Yeah, a falsified logbook or two as well, I think, will have generate a few questions here and there.
Getting the sums wrong before he took off.
But as I say, every fibre of my being, you know, I mean, we're lucky that we've spent a lot of time with pilots and we know what people have to go through to get their type ratings and the sheer volume of money you need to sort of get there, and yet somehow... I can't.
This would be like me being here at home with the sim set up here, and flying the 737-800, and then going up into Ryanair and saying, "Well, I can fly it here at home, so I'll fly it for you. That's fine. I don't need training. I can do it at home."
One suspects that that the training you've had on your 737 on your simulator at home is perhaps more comprehensive, shall we say, than what this particular individual has had. By the
I also wonder that the FAA do turn up sometimes to check correct operation and all the rest of it. Now I don't know whether this applies to business jet type flying rather than Part 121, commercial aircraft operation. Perhaps Armando will be able to tell us about that. But nonetheless, whichever way you look at it, whichever way you cut it, it's absolutely reckless and incompetent. And negligent is the word I was looking for.
Negligent is a great word,
totally.
yeah. Yes. I say somebody somewhere has done a terribly awful thing. I mean, not to mention the guy that's, who isn't qualified is sort of, parading around pretending essentially that he's a fully qualified pilot when clearly he's not. But yeah, as you say, it's not. The thing is the problem isn't just with him, as you say, Nev, is it? I mean, there's obviously an issue here with the checks that were taking place with this particular outfit. Something that needs to be looked into urgently, I would argue.
Anyway, I'm sure he will. He's probably, flipping burgers now somewhere.
Lovely.
Instead. Armando is up next with a story for us, and this story is coming from Delta.com, and it's all about a certain story that I think, guys, when this news broke this week, I think our group chat did erupt with a few questions as to who may be the pilot of this aircraft, but we obviously don't know. But with the story, we'll hand things over to Armando.
We had a little bit of activity this last Wednesday morning at Charlotte Douglas International Airport when a Delta Airlines 717, that was Delta Airlines flights 1092, was operating from Atlanta to Charlotte Douglas. Actually made an emergency landing on the airport's runway 36 left. I listened to the recording of this, and it seemed to be that the crew had it perfectly under control. They were coming in on their initial approach to 36 left there at Charlotte Douglas, one of 3 runways there, and they got a gear unsafe indication. They broke off the approach as they were on their initial one. They broke off the approach, talked to the approach controller, said, hey, we're going to go out, run some checklists. Didn't actually take very long. It looked like they just kind of went into a left downwind, ran the checklist, and called ATC and said, well, it is what it is, and we're coming back in. We're ready to come back in. They did a low pass, so down 36 left, a brand new air traffic control tower there at Charlotte Douglas. They were able to determine that the nose gear doors were open, but that the nose gear was not deployed at all. So they came around, did their checklist, and there was some great video taken by some of the passengers on board where it looked incredibly smooth. The crew came in, did a fantastic job. They brought it into 36 left, held the nose off. There wasn't even any grinding noise, no sparks, no nothing. Pretty uneventful landing where the passengers, you could see that they almost didn't even know that the emergency landing had happened. They ended up deploying the emergency slides out the front, so doors 1 left and right, or the service door on the right. All the passengers got out, so I believe it was 96 passengers, 5 crew, that's 2 pilots, 3 flight attendants. Everybody evacuated, no problem. They were all out there on the runway. Runway 36 left at Charlotte Douglas is the most remote or the most removed from the terminal, so it seemed like it was a pretty good area to contain the emergency, contain all the people, yet still having 2 additional runways for takeoffs and landings there. There were actually minimal delays at Charlotte Douglas. There was a couple of delays, but pretty minimal considering there was an airplane on the runway. It took them, the FAA, the NTSB, they sent Delta Airlines tweeted out that there was a recovery crew on the way. It took them about 10 hours to move the airplane off the runway. Now, we did check with our resident Acme pilot. I don't know if I'm making a connection there. It was not him. I actually have a couple other friends that fly Delta 717s. Not for Acme, for different. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. But basically, nobody that we know was involved in the incident. And again, it just seemed like very professional on the crew. The CEO of Delta Airlines put out a message thanking the crew for their professionalism, and really, really well done. Turned into a big sort of non-event. Yeah, a little bit of excitement right here in my hometown, Charlotte Douglas.
I mean, you were saying earlier, like, all jokes aside type thing. It feels like national wheels fall off kind of weird,
yeah.
doesn't it? It's not ideal, shall we say? But yeah, as I say, handled really brilliantly, as I guess you would absolutely expect with an airline like that. Professionally dealt with. Everybody's fine. A win.
Yeah, I mean, we've all seen. I think that most people have seen the video that was on Twitter, that was taken from inside the cabin of the aircraft, and apart from the fact that some people were in the brace position and some people were, I think, some are reading books and whatever. Yeah. It like Nick said. Nick, you said it did seem very smooth and
very well handled. And actually, looking at the pictures of the aircraft as well, I kind of feel like they can, get a trolley jack underneath that, pop the front wheel out, it'd be good to go.
And away they go, yeah. Mash is saying in the chat room, by the way, barely need the slide. You can just hop out of the door. It's just nice and low, isn't it? Away you go.
The low rider edition.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, indeed.
Yeah, actually, thinking about the slide, don't think would the slide deploy with the nose down that low, Nev? Because obviously you've got the bottom base of the door where the slide is. Whether it would, I suppose it would deploy, wouldn't it? It would just be.
Well, I think the I don't think its angle will be what decides whether it'll deploy or not, isn't it? Because it is a manual thing that you do with the door, isn't it? If it remains armed and you open the door, then the slide will deploy, won't it?
Have them out on both sides.
Because at that angle, it's not so much a slide and more a sort of bouncy castle. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
indeed.
But it's good. It's good that these guys were obviously good and got the aircraft down safely. And it's good. It's good. Good. We like a good outcome when things like this happen. And it wouldn't surprise me if Delta, prop this up, release the gear, take it in the workshop, do a bit of patch up work, and this 717 will be back in the air within a month.
I mean, it may be a few layers of aluminium missing off the bottom. That's the only thing.
Bit of body filler, it'll be fine.
Oh, okay, right, fair enough.
So, Nev, you've got the next story, all about FedEx.
Yes, the freighting business. On simpleflying.com, it says that FedEx is going to park or retire 29 aircraft during the next year. So on June the 20th, just gone, FedEx released its latest financial results, revealing ongoing demand weakness. The freighter mover reported that the performance witnessed in its most recent fiscal quarter was due to both demand weakness and cost inflation. Part of the company's plan to deal with this is to reduce its costs and park a portion of its fleet. The pandemic highlighted the importance of robust and reliable supply chains, and this resulted in numerous entities getting into or boosting their presence in the air cargo market. So, for example, Air Canada retired its passenger Boeing 737-300 ERs and converted some of them into freighters. The airline also ordered new freighters directly from Boeing. As recently as February of last year, FedEx had been mulling a large freighter order with Boeing or Airbus, and of course the shift in the market may have put a hold on this potentially major deal. Indeed, as supply chains are slowly restored and passenger aircraft fill the skies once again, air cargo capacity in the bellies of these jets is back. In fact, in May 2023, a report by IATA notes that the uptick in belly capacity has resulted in a 2.3% decline in freighter capacity. Additionally, after 2.5 years of continuous freighter operations, activity in this category ceased in March. FedEx is experiencing this shift in market demand firsthand. In its recently quarterly report, the firm stated that FedEx Express continues to implement volume-related and structural cost reduction actions, including further reductions in flight hours and the early retirement of certain aircraft and related assets to mitigate the negative effect of ongoing demand weakness. According to FreightWaves, FedEx will reduce its operating costs by removing 29 aircraft from its fleet during the next year. This will see aircraft either permanently retired or temporarily stored. This move goes hand in hand with the operator's recent reduction in global flight hours. Providing more detail about the plan, FedEx's CEO Raj Subramaniam stated that 20 aircraft will be parked over the next year, whilst an additional 9 MD-11 freighters will be permanently retired. This builds on the company's recent aircraft retirement actions, which have already seen the retirement of these 18 aircraft over the past year. 12 MD-11s, 4 Boeing 757-200s and 2 Airbus A300-600s. Currently, FedEx has 46 MD-11s, but these will be phased out by around 2027 or 28. Despite numerous older freighters being grounded or retired, the FedEx mainline fleet will still see some growth. This is due to existing orders placed with Boeing in 2018, and FedEx will continue to take delivery of the new factory-built 767s and 777 freighters with chaviation.com, noting that the company is expecting 23 more 777 freighters and 6 more 767 freighters. So that's quite a cutback, isn't it, if you think about it, in terms of parking these aircraft or scrapping them altogether?
Indeed. Now, Carlos, I've got to ask the question here. Why do you hate this aircraft so much?
But the DC-10? Because it's blooming ugly. It's like someone got, someone designed an aircraft, like a twin-engine aircraft, and then thought, God, we've got a third engine here. What are we going to do with this third? I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll wang it on the tail, but we'll not mount it in flush with the fuselage. We'll just sling it on the the vertical tail fin, and it will look nice. Well, it doesn't. It looks blooming awful. And let's not forget, they had a lot of trouble, as Nev knows very well as well, with the original DC-10 when McDonnell Douglas first built these aircraft. And they had a lot of issues with the aircraft back then.
So you're saying all this, and they just wang it into the fin and all that kind of thing. But I mean, I'm looking at that aircraft, and it doesn't look any worse to me than the TriStar. I'm sorry.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
But it doesn't look any different. It doesn't look any different. I mean, the only thing is that third engine is maybe a tiny little bit lower. And that's literally it. Otherwise, it's practically identical.
Can we just look for a minute here? The TriStar here, beautiful engine number 2 here, blended in beautifully with the fuselage.
Yeah, all right, okay. So it's missing. It's missing a piece of plastic or body kit. That's all it's missing. It's just a plastic body kit that it's missing. That's the only. Otherwise, it's essentially engine. It just looks the same.
Well, I think that's Mr.
It's been nice working with you, Matt.
Hasn't it been lovely?
All your contributions over the years.
Absolutely. It's an unusual way to hand in your notice, isn't it?
It's interesting though. It's interesting though to see that that FedEx has still got the 300s, the A300s, because they were the weren't the 300s, Nev, the only Airbuses that had the control yokes rather than side sticks.
Yes, and the A310s, although I'm not sure about the freighter versions, whether there were any freighter versions of the A310s. But, of course, DHL still operate the A300s. I see them quite often at Heathrow.
If you ever get woken up or ever get up in the early hours of the morning, Matt, and you hear an aircraft over us here, because it does happen. Right. Trust me, if you get the Flight Radar 24 app up on your phone, have a look. It will be either a FedEx or a DHL aircraft going over here. Right.
Okay, all right, yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
I mean, you may not.
It won't be a TriStar because there aren't any flying.
There's one. There's one.
That was the one. Okay.
There's one.
Right.
There's one.
Lovely. Okay. All right then.
Anyway, moving swiftly on to
absolutely.
Matt with the next story, and this is actually a bit more of a somber story. Actually, this one.
Yeah. So serious voice on for this one. Really, it really is an awful story. But actually, we would perhaps normally sort of shy away from this, but I think it really important that we sort of talk about this really, especially as it's sort of Mental Health Week here in the UK as well. So Texas airport worker dies after being sucked into Delta plane engine. A 27-year-old airport employee has died after being sucked into a passenger air engine in San Antonio in Texas. The worker was ingested into the engine of a Delta plane that had just landed on Friday night, officials say. The death sparked concerns about safety procedures, but an investigation was called off after a medical examiner ruled he took his own life. There was no operational safety issues with either the airplane or the airport, officials ruled on Monday. The National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, had initially opened an investigation into the cause of death but closed it on Monday after the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office ruled on the cause of death. From our initial investigation, this incident was unrelated to Unify's operational processes, safety procedures and policies, said Unify Aviation, the ground crew operations company where the company employee worked. A Delta spokesperson said the airline was heartbroken to grieve the loss of an aviation family member's life. Our hearts and full support are with their family, friends and loved ones at this difficult time. Grief counsellors are being offered to support employees, officials told CBS News. The BBC's US partner. Now, this is an awful story, really. One thing I just want to mention, as I say, I mean, you know, it is tough for everyone out there at the moment, and we all deal with things very, very differently. And if you are struggling, there are lots of places you can go to get help. If you're in Canada or the US, you can just dial 911. You can contact the US National Suicide Prevention Lifeline on 1-800 273 8255 or the crisis test line by texting home to 741741. That's in the US. You can also in the US call 1-800 668 68688. Here in the UK, of course, you can call the Samaritans. The number for that is 116123. Lots of ways, and if you need help, hey, you know, if it helps you, reach out to me via the PTUK email if you need somebody to talk to. That's the thing. That's my takeaway from this. I mean, obviously, I'm sad for the people, you know, on this aircraft that may have witnessed this, because obviously that's going to leave a very serious mark. Obviously, that's not something you're going to forget, is it? Something as awful as that. But also, I feel very sad that this person, you know, felt that he got nobody to turn to, and that's really my takeaway from that story, is that somebody's, you know, just felt that they were literally on their own and had nowhere to turn to. So that's really why I wanted to share the details of if you need help, how to get in touch. But obviously, from all of us here at PTUK, you know, our thoughts go out to the families and friends, and indeed the people on the aircraft who will no doubt be aware of what happened here. But I think we probably don't need to talk about that much more. We'll probably leave that on there if that's okay.
But we're all here as a team for everyone. Absolutely. We're always here, and the WhatsApp number is there for a good reason.
Yeah, absolutely. You can get directly to Carlos now.
Yes.
Yeah. You can tell him how rubbish the TriStar is if you like. That'll go down well.
Yes, and then get immediately blocked. Oh. Anyway, moving swiftly on, Nick, you've got the next story, and I must admit, I don't know, was it you who found this story, Nick?
Yes, I think it was.
Because this is just bizarre.
Yeah, we're going to have a little chat about this one at the end. So it comes from the DCist.com. Dulles Airport will rehab some of its famous people movers from the 1960s.
Oh.
And Matt, I don't know if you can pop up some pictures. So I think it's quite interesting for everybody who's watching on YouTube. You can see what these things look like. So I'm going to sort of attempt to describe them as
bizarre,
looking a bit like a sort of cross between a coach and a truck trailer, but with windows in.
It looks like a train to me, but with truck wheels on it. You know,
yes,
rather than rail wheels.
So the plane mate is a variation of a mobile lounge. They are similar in appearance to mobile lounges, but can raise themselves to mate directly with an aircraft. This allows passengers to deplane directly aboard and be carried to the main terminal. The famous people mover and plane mate vehicles at Dulles Airport are getting a costly facelift. The mobile lounge people movers get airport passengers from the main terminal to Concourse D, which is not connected to the aerotrain. The plane mates act like a mobile jet bridge, taking passengers right up to the door of the parked planes. Dulles was created at the peak of the jet age, when airports were even bigger and were getting bigger, and passengers no longer walked up a staircase to a propeller plane. Dulles architect Eero Saarinen, who also did the TWA Flight Centre at JFK, saw mobile lounges as a convenient way to shorten walks from ticket counters to far-off planes. A Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority Committee approved a $16 million to completely rehabilitate 2 of the 60-plus-year-old vehicles. That renovation will require a complete ground-up re-engineer and design of a new vehicle on the old chassis, and will take about 3 years. If airport officials are pleased with the renovations, and I should hope they are at $16 million, from the Brookville Equipment Corporation, they'll have to vote on whether or not to fix the rest of the 18 mobile lounges and 29 plane-mate vehicles over the next 6 years. That project is slated to cost $160 million in total. MWAA first put it out for procurement before the pandemic, but now costs have gotten higher. Well, there's a surprise, thanks to specialized components. Manufacturers, funnily enough, aren't building mobile lounges anymore, as most airports have moved to train-based transportation between concourses. The original manufacturer no longer supports the vehicles either. Board members were mixed on the appeal of the lounges. One said that mobile lounges are not the most popular feature of Dulles, while another said they find the user experience to be very good. The refurbished vehicles will have another 20 years of useful life, and after that, the airport authorities will find alternative transportation. One possible option is the expansion of the automated aerotrain, which Dulles launched to most concourses in 2010. So, I have a question for you, Mr. Smith.
Oh, hello.
As a former coach driver, how many people would you get on a coach?
Well, it depends on the coach, but it can be anything. So a double-decker will quite often hold around about 130 passengers,
Okay, so
including standing. If it's one of the bendy bus things, I think it's about 80 to 90, something like that.
And how much would one of those set you back?
Oh, if you bought a posh new one with like aircon and all the bells and whistles, you're probably looking at between £300,000 and £400,000, something like that.
So not 16 million.
No.
So you could buy a lot of coaches instead of buying one of them.
I mean, to be fair, looking at the picture, it is quite spacious in there. I do think they could have done more if they are.
They could have put more seating in.
Well, there's an awful lot of space in the middle there. I guess you could stand up, and there's lots of sort of hand guardrails and all that kind of thing. A large part of me kind of likes this, though. I quite like the idea of getting on the vehicle that takes you literally right up to, and then lifts itself up to. Never mind all these stairs and all that kind of thing, or air bridges. You just it takes you to the aircraft, lifts itself up, and then you get straight onto the aircraft. Yeah, I actually really, it is cool. I find that quite exciting. I
have to say though that when I went on one for the first time, if you're not prepared for the experience, it is extremely odd.
Is it?
Because you are obviously taxiing in inverted commas
in a lounge,
in the same space as these 767s, 777s, and goodness knows what else. So the first time I went on one at Dulles Airport, it was really shocking for me, I have to say. I'm thinking, I hope this fella knows what he's doing, but he did have his Motorola, transceiver with him.
Oh, so that's all right.
He was talking to the ground control or the ramp frequency, I presume.
Do they raise up and down there?
But it was just. It was not something I was expecting.
And they lift up, don't they? Never. It literally, it literally docks absolutely. with the plane, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I've only been on one. I think it's just once actually when we went out to the aircraft. But I mean, really interesting way of getting around. But you are really mixing it with the heavy jets in the ramp area, which was a bit disconcerting, I have to say.
I mean, if you're at Luton or Stansted, where some of these gates are so far away, I mean, actually, I think this is quite a cool way to sort of get to the other end of the terminal. To then sort of like literally get on the. I mean, they still have variants of these, don't they? With Captain Cruise is saying Neville Bounds, they could easily run over a regional jet and crush it. To be fair. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Aaron P, I have to absolutely agree with you, Aaron. They wallow around and make me feel seasick.
Oh, really?
Yes. Oh my goodness! Suspension. Well, it's sort of very
airsoft and all that.
Very much so. Yeah, not a nice experience. I don't think.
I have to say, I mean,
something Jerry Anderson would have come up with.
Exactly.
Oh God.
Yeah, absolutely. Thunderbirds, I'll go. There is the these vehicles. I mean, they do have variants of these even here in the UK, where we've used special assistance to get my mum on the aircraft. Quite often, these sort of like pods, if you like, they're very sort of strange.
They're not that big.
They're fairly big. You'd be amazed how big they are. And
she said.
Well, quite indeed. And they go, but I mean, they're quite weird, as you say. Although the ride, I guess, because they're newer, but the ride's quite cool, as I say. And that is one of the coolest things, where it's literally lifted you up to like the rear gate, or the rear door. Sorry, usually on the other side. And then out you get and straight onto the aircraft, because it does all the lifting and everything for you, which is quite kind of cool.
Dirk Guest in the chat room says, I wonder if someone's ever turned one of these into a drag racer.
Oh, you could turn it into a nice mobile home.
You could have a
Do you know
good
what?
party on
That's
one
a
of
good
these.
idea.
Carlos,
Can you
you could get the
imagine
deck
one of
set
these?
up.
I mean, can you imagine that on the M25?
Well, I mean, it's a bit wider than most lanes on the M25, I think.
It would be going faster than most traffic.
Most traffic,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, that's true.
Oh, good Lord. Anyway, moving on before I go and buy one of those.
Oh.
It's on the AINonline.com, and the Department of Transport finds planning lacking to address the ATC staffing. Well, they should come and see Matt Smith. He'd love to go and work as an ATC controller. The National Air Traffic Controllers Association stepped up its call for the FAA to fully staff air traffic control facilities, citing a recent Transportation Inspector General report that found the agency lacks a plan to address shortages. Department of Transportation officer faces controller staffing challenges as air traffic control operations return to pre-pandemic levels at critical facilities, found that the lack of fully certified controllers and operational supervisors and traffic management coordinators pose a potential risk to air traffic operations. Department of Transport found that the managers interviewed at 16 of 17 facilities felt their locations were not adequately staffed. Many controllers have been working mandatory overtime and 6-day work weeks to cover shortages. And further, the FAA has made limited efforts to ensure adequate controller staffing, and that it lacks a plan to address the issues. The agency also says it has yet to implement a standardised scheduling tool to optimise controller scheduling practices at the facilities, and the FAA officials disagree on how to account for trainees when determining staffing numbers, the DOT and OIG added. NACTA maintained the report echoed that what it's been saying for years, that there are currently 1,200 fewer fully certified controllers today compared with 10 years ago. NACTA President Rich Santa said that FAA's flawed staffing model and inconsistent hiring have resulted in new hires not keeping pace with attrition over the past decades. The status quo is no longer sustainable, he said. The FAA's Air Traffic Organisation partnered with NACTA to collaboratively determine the number of fully certified controllers needed to meet fully operational statutory and contractual requirements. The collaborative work group found that 14,335 CPCs are required to meet the FAA's requirements, compared with 12,062 that FAA's model suggests. NACTA was pleased that the House FAA bill would require the FAA to base its staffing targets on the CRWG findings. The FAA should do so without the need for congressional intervention, and the Congress should not require further study into issues, Santa said. Now, I don't think, when I've looked on the, because I do look at them every now and again, on the websites, especially for NATS here in the UK and the air traffic control services here, there's occasionally, but not all the time, I think their staffing levels here in the UK are kind of fairly well in regards to air traffic control. I mean, we'd have to speak to our very good friend over at Heathrow, I think, to find out whether it is, whether they do have staffing shortages. But obviously in the US, we have to remember that there's we've got, 4 or 5 major airports here in the UK, whereas over in the US, there's probably 400 million airports to staff over there.
I mean, I guess it's like any industry involving aviation at the moment. There's a pilot shortage, there's a ground crew shortage. It kind of makes sense that there's going to be, sort of ATC shortages as well, as you say. And I mean, these are people who are retiring, and the people aren't there to the people aren't coming through the system. I mean, it's not a 5-minute job to get somebody up to speed be an air traffic controller. It is one of the most. I mean, I've been lucky enough to have gone to Heathrow Tower a couple of times. I think, Nev and Carlos, you've both been there as well. It is just mind-boggling, isn't it? The amount of information that they're juggling and processing. Like you need to be a special kind of person to do that job.
Because you are basically dealing with thousands of people's lives on a daily basis.
Absolutely, and I mean, obviously the pilot is ultimately responsible for getting it on the ground and all that kind of thing, but you have the responsibility of making sure that they have plenty of space to do it in. That's the thing there. Any thoughts, Nev?
Well, I'm surprised actually. You really would have thought that there'd be plenty of qualified people that would be around, but clearly, it's one of those things, isn't it? It's a big country, and a lot of regional and smaller airports as well as the big stuff as well. So
quite a long period of time involved in actually becoming qualified as well. I looked into this about 15 years ago as a possible career change, and the amount of sort of hoops that you have to go through, not only in terms of the training, but also the number of exams that you have to do, and then the potential that you could train for a fairly significant amount of time and then actually not meet the necessary standards. It's necessarily quite an onerous process to go through. And as you said earlier, Matt, this is not for everyone. It takes a very particular kind of mindset, I think, to be able to do this type of work.
Yeah, agreed.
I have to keep our eyes open for more about trying. We have to try and get someone on to talk about how in-depth the training process is, perhaps for ATC. Well, in the UK here anyway. We'll put our feelers out, see if we can get someone to come on the show. Nev, you have got the next story, and it's this time it's not BA having data breaches.
Oh dear, this is a bit of a bee in my bonnet. This is data breaches. It's on bleepingcomputer.com. That tells you all you need to know about this story, I think. American Airlines and Southwest Airlines, two of the largest airlines in the world, disclosed data breaches on Friday caused by the hack of pilot credentials, a third-party vendor that manages multiple airline pilots' applications and recruitment portals. Both airlines were informed of the pilot credentials incident on the 3rd of May, which was limited solely to the systems of the third-party vendor, with no compromise or impact on the airline's own networks or systems. Oh, that's okay then. I'm serious still. An unauthorized individual gained access to pilot credential systems on April the 30th and stole documents containing information provided by certain applicants in the pilot and cadet hiring process. According to breach notifications filed on Friday with Maine's Office of the Attorney General, American Airlines said that the data breach affected 5,745 pilots and applicants, while Southwest reported a total of 3,009. Our investigation determined that the data involved contains some of your personal information, such as your name and social security number, driver license number, passport number, date of birth, airman certificate number, and other government-issued identification numbers, American Airlines revealed. Although no evidence indicating that the pilot's personal information was specifically targeted or exploited for fraudulent or identity theft purposes were found, the airlines will from now on direct all pilot and cadet applications to self-managed internal portals. We're no longer utilizing the vendor, and moving forward, pilot applications are being directed to an internal portal managed by Southwest, the airline said. Both American Airlines and Southwest Airlines have also notified relevant law enforcement authorities of the breaches and are fully cooperating with their ongoing investigation into the matter. This is American Airlines, in fact, have been hit by other breaches in recent years. And this disclosure comes after American Airlines said that another data breach in September 22 that impacted over 1,708 American Airlines customers and team members following a July 2022 phishing attack that led to the compromise of a number of employee email accounts. Well, this is
it's not ideal, is it?
Honestly, it's I mean, these things happen, and it's happened to British Airways, it's happened to all sorts of people, but just going back to the story about the Falcon trijet and the unqualified pilot, this does have the potential, doesn't it, to, with this kind of data breach, for other people to get hold of information that they could use themselves for identity purposes and all kinds of things. I don't think it happened in this case. It certainly has the potential for it, doesn't it? It's just incredibly worrying, this kind of stuff.
Well, as you say, it's very personal data that they've got their hands onto. I mean, things like government IDs and all that kind of thing. You know, you've got the potential there, as you say, to sort of genuinely, pretend you're someone else, and that's the issue, isn't it? But it's so difficult, isn't it? Because we are being encouraged to move all of our lives online, and it's just like I don't know, I don't know how we stop it. I mean, is it just because? I don't know. Does there need to be more sanctions in place for the people who are holding our data? To make sure that they are spending the money on keeping their systems protected and updated and all that kind of thing. Because most of these data breaches are usually as a result of some security flaw that's been discovered in the software.
Yes, and of course they won't discover it until it happens very often, because there are clever young teenage people probably doing this from their bedroom. It's absolutely horrific. But just an example again of no matter how careful you are with your data, you just never know what can happen with these large organisations.
Yeah. You see all these companies and stuff online, and on my adverts you see on TV and online for protect your, protect this, protect your PC, protect this and that and the other. Pay us this so much a month, blah blah blah, but it still happens.
I did laugh the other day. American Express phoned me up to ask me a question about something on the credit card, and they said to me, "Mr. Bounds, we're going to take you through security now." I'm going, I don't think so. I'm going to take you through security because you phoned me, and in fact,
absolutely.
I'm not going to answer any more of your questions. So I put the phone down. Now, as it turned out, it was them. But you just don't know.
No, you don't know. But this is the thing, isn't it? That's the problem, and this sort of highlights this very problem, isn't it? How you've got into this, Nev, because it's like literally. So I'm receiving a phone call from a number that I don't recognise, or it might be withheld, or any of the above, and they're saying, "Hello, it's such and such from American Express." Now, I mean, I've had calls where they say, "Oh, hello, I'd like to talk to you about your nationwide account, please," and you go, "Well, I don't have a nationwide account, so you can go away." But that sort of thing. But as you say, if they sort of strike gold and sort of say, "Hello, we'd like to talk to you about your Monzo account," or something like that, do you know what I mean? And you're saying American Express card and stuff. I do think there needs to be. And in fact, actually, I think it was when I used to bank with NatWest of all places, and I had a similar experience to what you're referring to there, Nev. And actually, what I ended up doing was they said to me, "Go and get your card, ring the number on the back, and then they'll put you through to me." And I thought, now that makes sense, because you've called the number that's on your card that you know is correct, because obviously it's on the back of your card and all that kind of thing. But as you say, I do think these companies, as Nev, you've highlighted there, I mean, these companies do need to be a little bit more, we're being expected to be more tech savvy and more, security savvy, but they need to do the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
PTUK, where we care about your data.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Fortunately, we don't really hold anybody's data. So
no, we don't. No,
absolutely.
True.
Indeed.
Right, Matt, you've got a next story, and I must admit, when I saw this one on the list, I thought It gave me many good ideas.
Oh goodness me! I'm terrified for your wife on her behalf already. It's simpleflying.com is the website. Try and get through this as quickly as we can. A British entrepreneur buys ex-United Airlines Boeing 737-200 for $5,000 and turns it into a stunning Airbnb. If you had the chance to spend $5,000 on something you like, what would you spend it on? Carlos would absolutely do this. Maybe a first-class ticket to an exotic destination. What about a retired Boeing 737-200? That's exactly what British entrepreneur Stephen Northam decided to do when he bought an ex-United Airlines Boeing 737-200 and turned it into the perfect Airbnb for geeks and travellers looking for a one-of-a-kind experience. Of course, moving the aircraft to its current location in the heart of the UK's Hampshire countryside and turning it into a dreamy accommodation required more investment than just that. According to Mr. Northam, £3,000 was needed to relocate the Boeing 737, while £15,000 was invested in the restoration. I'm going to try and pop you some pictures up while I go through the rest of the story. The magic begins even before accessing this one-of-a-kind space. Indeed, guests will board the plane using actual airport stairs. I say Jen Niffer would be very excited about that. On-board customers will find 3 beds, multiple TVs, an Xbox, and a real flight simulator with a 49-inch curved screen in the original cockpit. That would very much excite
my word.
A certain Mr. Stebbings there. Well, there are some pictures of the cockpit. I'll show you that in a moment. Additionally, the 737 features a shower, a small kitchen and a toilet, besides plenty of storage for luggage. The best part is that nobody will check the weight and size of it before boarding. How often do you hear about entrepreneurs who buy retired aircraft and convert them into Airbnbs? Probably not that much. Mr. Northam's creation caught the interest of many who wanted to know more about his creative idea. Featured in an episode of George Clark's Amazing Spaces. That's a programme here in the UK on Channel 4 usually. Mr. Northam explains how everything started when the Boeing 737 was put up for the auction site of Chichester College in the UK, where it served as a training facility. I think this is the photograph that Carlos is going to get very excited about, and we are literally looking at a giant screen that's been fitted in the cockpit there, and it does genuinely look. The only thing I would have done is put another 2 screens either side, just so that it looked like you've got the side windows as well. As if owning the front section of the fuselage of a Boeing 737 and turning it into an Airbnb was not enough, Mr. Northam also managed to take possession of 2 engine cowlings. His creative mind led him to turn one of them into a hot tub, as you do. The other one was tilted upwards, and a comfortable seating area was built in so that guests could get the feeling of being seated inside the engine. Over 3 months during the summer of 2022, Mr. Northam owned one of the very first Boeing 737s ever from a knackered piece of aviation history. I'm sorry, that doesn't read right into the Airbnb of your dream. This 737 was one of the classics, the first iteration of the incredibly successful narrow-body aircraft. Indeed, it's almost 55 years old today, and originally entered into service in September 1968 for United Airlines with registration November 9028 Union. After United, it flew for another airline, including Eurolair and Air Berlin, until it retired with Air Méditerranée in May 2002. According to data retrieved by CH Aviation, the aircraft has 69,800 hours under its wings. It was used predominantly for short-haul hops, as its average stage length of 1 hour and 37 minutes.
I absolutely bloomin' love this.
It's quite quirky, isn't it? It's quirky.
It looks good. I love the fact that the guys kept a lot of the internal features in the aircraft, with the overhead bins and also the passenger, service units above the head with the lights and everything on.
Yeah,
it looks so well done.
And keeping the seats in as well, I think, and using them, like around the tables and all that kind of thing. I just think it's brilliant. It's been nicely done.
I would absolutely go and stay here as an Airbnb.
I fear it might be an expensive Airbnb. I'm just saying.
Don't care.
Fair enough. Righty-ho.
But it has given me an idea. There's so many of these kicking around, these fuselage bits and pieces, and especially with the old classics that have been retired for quite some time now. That I was looking outside the garden. I thought, that would fit out there.
Would it? Right. Okay. Yes. Wrap. Yes. Yeah. Try it, Carlos. I mean, it's only going to go one of two ways, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Emma,
you'll either be living in it.
Can I have a aircraft fuselage in the garden? Oh,
no,
you didn't hear that, did you?
No.
She said no.
Foxtrot, Oscar off, I believe was.
She said no in a polite way.
Did she? Very good. Okay, now we're going to leave it there for the commercial stories this week. And Nev, we've got a really, really special piece to share with everyone, haven't we?
Yes. Well, you remember a few weeks ago, Carlos and I were in Edinburgh and went to the Museum of Flight at East Fortune. We've been bringing you various bits of segments from the aircraft that we visited over during the day there, which was really fascinating. Great collection there. But we also had the opportunity of speaking with Ian Brown, who's the curator of the museum. And I thought I'd play this to you in its entirety. We've actually got two parts of it, but this first part is about 30 minutes long. But I think it's worth playing it out because Ian's encyclopedic knowledge is absolutely fascinating. So let's go up to East Fortune, where we'll join Carlos.
So you join me here in the hangar with one of the most iconic aircraft, I think, that we get to see here on the show, the Concorde. And I'm here with Ian, who's the curator here at the museum. Ian, welcome onto the show.
Thank you.
So Ian, tell us a bit about yourself. What's your job here at the museum?
Well, I'm the curator here at the museum, which means I get to work with this fantastic collection. That most of what I do is the acquisition, so it's going out and adding to the collection, whether it's full-size aircraft or your pilots' clothing or all manner of stuff. But also the interpretation of it, so putting things on display, writing the labels, working out what stories we want to tell and how to tell it, and it's the dream job basically.
So how did the aviation start with you? Is it a passion just for aviation, and you thought one day I'm going to work at the Aviation Museum? That's your dream job.
Well, for many of a certain age like myself, there's one company to blame, and that's Airfix. You're getting an Airfix model as a kid, and the kind of interest in aviation grew from that, because there's no sort of family connections really. So yeah, it was just getting it as a birthday present, and it got me interested in the Second World War, and I did a lot of reading and started sort of researching local history during the war and things like that. And then I wanted to kind of get into do something in that subject, and thought, well, that is basically one of two things. It's either become an archivist or a museum curator. And I thought, well, if you're an archivist, all you do is pull out documents for other people to do the research, and that didn't really sound like fun. So I thought, well, if you're a museum curator, you get to work with the real objects that were there at great moments in history. And I thought, yeah, that sounds like the job for me. And so I went and did a history degree, worked in one of our sister organisations for a few years, and then this job came up and I was lucky enough to get it.
So how long have you been working for the museum now?
So I've been here for 18 years. I worked front of house staff for 6 years before that, which I think more curators should do that. It's great. It gives you an opportunity to see what the public enjoy and what they don't enjoy, and you're getting to work with the public before you kind of ensconce yourself behind the scenes working in object stores all the time. But I can still remember one of the first things I did when I started in post was helping fit some of the seats back into Concorde just before it went on display. But yeah, that's a few years ago now.
So we're obviously sitting here literally underneath the Concorde here, the BA Concorde. Which particular Concorde is this? Are we sitting under now?
So yeah, this is Bravo Oscar Alpha Alpha, which has the distinction it was the first Concorde into commercial passenger service. So for those that remember back in the 70s, when Concorde entered commercial service, there was a simultaneous takeoff from Heathrow and Charles de Gaulle. So the Air France flight was flying to Rio, the BA flight was flying to Bahrain. So that British Airways flight was Alpha Alpha. So because it was to Bahrain rather than Rio, it landed first. So we claim the distinction of this was the first commercial Concorde flight.
So I suppose it begs the question, especially for the listeners who are watching, what did it take to, I mean, did they BA come up to you and say, we've got a Concorde, you know, we're retiring it from service, would you like it in your museum? Or was it a case of you had to go out and try and obtain it yourself?
Well, I mean, when they announced the fleet was retiring, they basically advertised and said any interested organisation get in touch. And I mean, it was quite a lengthy process, obviously having to put bids together and demonstrate that. I mean, I think there was, I can't remember the numbers, I think it was something like 400 museums worldwide.
Wow.
Bid for the 7 British Airways Concordes. So, it was a fierce competition that we were very lucky here that we were one of the museums chosen to receive one. I think the fact that the man who led the team that certainly designed the beautiful but complex wing design was from Midlothian in Scotland. And a lot of the early testing flights, you're looking at the effects of the sonic boom. A lot of that was done from Prestwick up the west coast of Scotland and elsewhere as well. But a lot of the pilot training flights were done at Prestwick as well. So there was a strong Scottish story there, which with backing from the Scottish Parliament, I think tipped the case in our favour. But yeah, we were one of the very lucky few.
I say very lucky. So in regards to the aircraft, obviously where it's sitting now, you've got, am I right in thinking you have an active runway here?
The runways aren't in use as such. There's a microlight school that uses one of the post-war extensions. That you can use the runways, but you have to get permission from the farmer. So it's not a licensed runway as such.
So I suppose the question is, how did you get this Concorde here?
Well, yeah, as part of the bidding process, when we were notified that we were going to receive a Concorde, the quite intense work then went up a notch. There was a lot of work done to look at what was involved in flying Concorde in, and it would have been possible. We'd have had to, I mean, they'd cored the runway and looked at it structurally. It would have needed to be resurfaced, but it was just within the minimum landing distance for an unladen Concorde. So it was a possibility. In the end, the aircraft that were allocated was one of the 2 that didn't get the modifications after the Paris crash. So it didn't get the Kevlar fuel tank line and all the other mods that were done. So that was the 2 aircraft were Alpha Alpha and Alpha Bravo that some of the viewers might know is still down at Heathrow now.
Looking a bit weathered.
Yes. I mean, no one really knows what's going to happen with her eventually, but because that, I mean, the aircraft we were allocated as the one that made the first passenger flight, we were delighted to get that one. But because it wasn't going to fly here, then became even more of a logistical challenge. There was the big team at the museum working with BA and contractors on it, and basically it was moved from Heathrow along the A4 and the A30 in the middle of the night, down to Isleworth, onto a vessel that could reach Isleworth at high tide, was then taken down the Thames. It was sort of covered over for the journey, but brought out for a photo shoot in front of the Houses of Parliament. And what I find quite interesting, one of the pre-production aircraft went to Brooklands, and I remember discussing with the curator there, Julian Temple, that because of the coverage of the move of Alpha Alpha, his parents knew that we were getting a Concorde here, but they didn't realise there was one at Brooklands, which their own son was the curator of. So it was in the 6 o'clock news and it had massive coverage. Then sort of put back inside the vessel, taken down the Thames, up the east coast of the UK by sea, to Torness Nuclear Power Station, which is about 15 miles east of here, which was the nearest location with a pier big enough to unload the aircraft. Brought by road from there, then across the fields using track that the army had laid for a training exercise, which had to be diverted to avoid a badger set as a protected species. So that came across country about 2 miles then into the museum, and brought into the site to the end of the hangar doors, then did a 180 and reversed into the hangar, into the position that it's in now.
But worth the journey, I think.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I mean, the only sad aspect of it was, in order to make that journey, we had to cut the outer wings off. So they've been reattached, and to be honest, most visitors are hard pushed to actually identify that. So, I mean, obviously, there's a whole debate as to whether any Concorde will ever fly, but one thing we do know for certain is this one will never fly again, unfortunately.
That's a shame. When you look at the aircraft, I mean, one of the things that struck me when I walked into the hangar here is how immaculate the aircraft does look. You know, if you compare it, say, to the one that is at Heathrow, which is not looking too great these days, but this, you honestly would think that you could just pull this out of the hangar and fly.
We were very lucky. I mean, a lot of our visitors think it's interesting that we built this hangar especially for Concorde, because it just fits in the space perfectly. When actually this hangar was built in 1944, and it says a lot about the RAF that they built a standard T2 hangar thinking in 1944, well, it might one day be used to house Concorde. But yeah, I believe, certainly of the British Airways Concordes, this was the only one that, when it went to its new home in a museum or whatever, went straight indoors. So it's never been suspect to
the element.
The one in Manchester that's in their lovely building obviously was outside for a little while. That because of that, it's never been exposed to the elements. It's gone straight from the hangar at Heathrow, via the move to straight into the hangar here, and yeah, it certainly has helped its condition.
It's very good. But you've also got some other great aircraft here. We've been out this morning and had a look at your BA C-111, which again, Ned was impressed because it's a BA C-111, and obviously the Comet you've got here as well, and the Vulcan, which was when we had our 100th live show many years ago now. We actually broadcast live from the Vulcan, inside the Vulcan at the Norwich Aviation Museum, which is not far from us. But those obviously are outside the view, but again, great to see those aircraft here. Any particular favourite of yourself?
It's like being asked to choose your favourite child. I mean, the obvious target is the Vulcan. I mean, who doesn't love the Vulcan? we are really lucky here that we have one of the 2 Vulcans that have actually seen combat service. So I mean, as many viewers will know, the Vulcan that bombed the runway at Stanley is at Waddington. I think it's still at Waddington. But we have the other one which attacked a couple of the Argentinian air defence radars in the area. And most famously after this, so that was Black Box 5 and 6. After Black Box 6, the refueling probe broke off on the way back to Ascension, so it had to divert into Rio, and the crew were interred for about 10 days, enjoying themselves sitting at the airport in Brazil. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's a great history to that one. But you know, we've got a Danair Comet 4, and
I think it's a name that most listeners will know. Danair was a popular airline, I think, back in the mid 80s or sort of early 80s, mid 80s.
Well, I mean, obviously, famously, BOEC did the first into service with a jet airliner, first transatlantic jet service in 1958, 3 weeks before Pan Am. But as the Comet was gradually kind of being retired from service, Danair eventually ended up as the largest operator of the Comet with something like, I can't remember the figure, I think it was 45 Comets at one time. The one we've got was originally RAF Transport Command and then straight to Danair, so it doesn't have the BOEC history, but it's still got its early 80s Danair interior, which for those of a certain age, there's a what's the film? I'm trying to remember. There's the film set in the British television series set in the department store. Are You Being Served?
Are You Being Served? Yeah.
They made a movie of Are You Being Served where they went on holiday to Spain, and which is bizarre because they take off from Heathrow and land at Gatwick. But let's, I think they board at Heathrow and take off from Gatwick. But it's exactly the same interior because I think the film was made in '78 or something like that. No door to the cockpit, just a curtain. No overhead lockers, just a kind of parcel shelf that very much of it's, and obviously ashtrays and the armrests. But I mean, even the 111, it's very easy to, I don't know, not dismiss, but kind of overlook the 111.
I have some good fond memories of flying.
It's probably, there's few people who would put it in their top 5 aircraft of all time, but I mean, the one we've got, which was named Lothian Regions, yes. It's perfect for us. Operated the Edinburgh and Glasgow shuttles down to London, so it's very much a story that ties in with the history of Scotland, really. And it'd be lovely to have a British Caledonian one with that sort of the service to West Africa and things like that. But the 111 is just one of those workhorses that never really gets the recognition it deserves. So it's great to have it in the collection.
I think most people associate heavy usage or very popular aircraft with, let's say, the 737 from Boeing. Obviously, one of the most popular narrow-bodied aircraft of its time, still is. But the 111 for us in the UK, I think, and in Scotland, was, as you said, a workhorse. It was a popular regional jet that you could jet down, like myself, to Tunisia or somewhere on holiday in. And I think it's lovely to go back on board. And
in some respects, it's nice if only because it's an aircraft that avoids that standard twin-engine underwing pod that you get into that cliche of every aircraft nowadays looks exactly the same. At least the 111 was from the era when aircraft really had character.
Had real engines.
Yeah.
With the hush kits on as well.
Well, exactly.
So it's not just a static air, you've got some great static aircraft outside. What else has the museum got to offer? Because you've got some great hangars here with exhibits in.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky. We are, most aviation museums are very limited in their size. I mean, we're lucky as a national museum. We have 3 Callender Hamilton hangars on this T2, so we've got quite a lot of space, although we've kind of run out of space for more aircraft. Museum's always a poor vacuum, but we collect all aspects of aviation, so we're not limited just to military, just to light, private aircraft. We do have Concorde, we've got a Comet, a 111 Viscount, but we've got the military stuff as well. We've got a Spitfire. It's a Mark 16, so it was built in July 1945, so it's not a wartime veteran, but it's still a Spitfire. It's surprising how many museums in the UK actually don't have Spitfires when you think how many there used to be around. And one good thing about going back to Concorde is it changed the demographic of the museum. So our visitor profile became much more families rather than just enthusiasts. And the number of people who come to see Concorde and then go round the hangars and go, oh, that's a Spitfire, I've heard of a Spitfire, and they've maybe never seen one in their life, but they actually get to see when they wouldn't come to an aviation museum normally because it's not their thing. But we also have some, we've got all the kind of standard things like a Meteor, a Harrier. We've got a Bolingbroke, which is the Canadian version, the Blenheim, which is actually painted in its Commonwealth Air Training Plan colours, which is unusual. It's not painted as a Blenheim, because almost half of all British and Commonwealth Air crew trained under that scheme, but it's not commemorated anywhere in the UK really, other than here. So we've got a lot of the kind of things you would expect to see, a Tornado, a Jaguar. But we've got some more unusual things. So we've got a Scottish Aviation Twin Pioneer, which, as the National Museum of Flight Scotland, you might expect. But more unusual things like a Messerschmitt 163 Comet, which there's not that many around now. What's particularly interesting about our one, I would imagine many viewers will have heard of Captain Eric Winkle Brown, Britain's greatest ever pilot, who is known for many, many things, but is the only Allied pilot ever to fly the Comet under rocket power. And the aircraft that he flew that day, which was the 10th of June 1945, is the Comet we have here. He was from Scotland. The Comet that he flew is in Scotland, we were able to, and we were able to interview him before he sadly passed, and we've got some footage of him talking about what it was like flying the Comet, and many of the other aircraft as well. He flew most of the types we've got here. We've also got it's an Aero S103, which is the Czech-built version of the MiG-15 BIS, so the upgraded MiG-15. We also have an unusual aircraft. We've got a General Aircraft Signet, which was a pre-war private light aircraft with tricycle undercarriage, so quite unusual for the 30s. But as with many aircraft that period was impressed during the war, so it's actually displayed in its wartime camouflage colours. But the one we've got was with 51 Operational Training Unit. Basically it was used to train night fighter pilots who would possibly be converting onto the Havoc, the Douglas Boston Havoc, as potentially as a night fighter, when they wouldn't have been familiar with tricycle undercarriage. But interestingly, the chief flying instructor at that time at 51 OTU was one Guy Gibson. So he actually flew that Signet twice. It's in his logbook. So for an aircraft that maybe not many people will have heard of, it's got quite an interesting history.
As I say, the history on this site as well, where we're sitting now, it was a functional site, wasn't it? Was it a naval base?
It was a naval air station in the First World War. So a combination of airships, patrolling the North Sea looking for U-boats, but also fixed-wing aircraft. And there was a couple of Zeppelins bombed Edinburgh in April 1916, and there was an aircraft took off, an Avro 504 actually, took off from here to try and intercept them with no ground control, no ground aids. Completely failed to find them, and the guy was seriously injured landing back here in the dark. They also, towards the end of the First World War, they formed a torpedo training unit who were training on torpedo dropping techniques with the idea they were going to attack the German high seas fleet. The armistice came along before that happened, but actually they would fly the aircraft to a beach near Dunbar, which is just to the east of here, and load the torpedoes on the beach because they would have been too heavy to take off from the grass airfield here. But it was incredibly secret, but it was the techniques of torpedo dropping from aircraft were actually pioneered here. So you could argue that the British attack on Taranto and the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor started with a torpedo training unit here at East Fortune. So that's the First World War story. Then closed at the end of First World War 1922. Reactivated in 1940 as a night fighter operational training unit, training a lot of Commonwealth crews and free Poles, free French, free Belgians in night fighter techniques. Then in 1942 it converted to Coastal Command training, anti-shipping strike, so again torpedo carrying aircraft. So kind of things went full circle again.
It's quite the history that you've got here.
And then so it closed again in the Second World War, and slight resurgence in 1961. We reopened for 3.5 months. They were lengthening the runway at Edinburgh Airport, and so for that period in the summer of 1961, this became Edinburgh Airport.
Oh wow!
Which is quite interesting. If you look at the British European Airways timetables for the period, they actually include the bus time for the bus service to come out here as part of the flight timetable.
That's quite. I didn't realise that. Didn't realise that at all. That is very interesting. But it's also, honestly, I can't express enough, especially for the listeners who are watching the show. They need to come and see what you've got here, because there's so much to see and do. But is there, and we're going to start to wrap up this half of the chat in a moment, because I know Nev's got some great questions for you. But is there one aircraft that you would love to get here? Anything, and whether any sort of aircraft. Is there one that you would love to get on this museum site if you had the chance to go and?
Yeah, I mean, we as a collection. So I mean, as part of the National Museum of Scotland, some of our aviation collection is displayed in our main museum in Edinburgh. So we have the Pilcher Hawk from 1896, which is the oldest British aircraft surviving. So I mean, Pilcher Hawk, for those that haven't heard of him, he was contemporary of Otto Lilienthal. So it was that kind of what they called a glider, but it was basically a hang glider when they were just sort of learning how to do it. And he was working on a powered aircraft when he tragically crashed, flying the Hawk that we have, and died of his injuries 3 days later. So we've got that from 1896, and then our next aircraft is the Pussmoth from 1930. So I'd love to get a First World War aircraft. The problem is they're all either in museums or they're replicas.
Yeah.
And what's really annoying is we used to have, in the 1950s, we acquired a Parnell Panther, which I'd be surprised if many viewers have actually heard of that. It was a very obscure, rare naval aircraft for the end of the First World War. Unusual for the respect of being a naval aircraft, rather than its wings folding, the fuselage folded.
I think I've seen that.
Probably up there in terms of the ugliest aircraft. It was not a pretty thing. We acquired one in the 1950s, but at that time we didn't have the museum flight. It was never ever going to be displayed in a main museum in Edinburgh, so we've still got the Bentley BR2 rotary engine, an interplane strut, an undercarriage leg, and the rest was chucked in a bonfire. And it's a salutary lesson of, I mean, that would be a completely unique aircraft now, but yeah, sadly we don't have it anymore.
Well, it's been great to chat with you, Ian. I know Nev's got some great questions for you coming up, but yeah, I must admit, you just saying about the parts of aircraft out. Those who watch the show know that I'm back at home, in my office at home. I've got a window section from a BA 777, stage 1 fan blade from an RB211 engine, a fuselage window section from a L1011 RAF TriStar as well, one of the Royal Air Force ones, which got sadly dismantled and broken up at Bruntonthorpe. But yeah, I can. Are you the same? Have you got a piece at home? I have to ask.
I try not to collect bits. I mean, obviously there's potential conflicts of interest, and that collecting things that the museum would also collect.
Yeah.
I mean, my own personal research area is Second World War radar. So I've got a couple of valves and a lot of documents and things from people who served on radar. But whilst I have the passion for it, I tend to keep the collecting for the museum rather than, I don't want to lose my job because I've taken something that should have come here instead.
I know a lot of people ask, how am I still married? The wife puts up with a hell of a lot, but it's still good.
There is that old one of, the wife saying, well, that Rolls-Royce engine, it's the engine of me, and I reflect on that as I read my magazine off my Merlin engine table.
But it's great to talk to you, Ian.
Well, thank you.
Nev's going to be chatting with you very soon. Got some great questions for you. And thank you, Ian. Thanks.
No problem, thanks.
Wow. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
How about that? Many thanks to Ian for his massive contribution there. I've got a second part to play out. Well, perhaps we'll play that out next week, actually, or when I've finished editing it. But I just could listen to Ian all day. And isn't it marvellous when you've got the curator of the museum, as he is, and he's so enthusiastic and knowledgeable about the subject?
It's the passion, isn't it? It's that passion, isn't it, that makes you good at that position, doesn't it?
I think he's got one of those jobs I think we'd all love to have.
Yeah, although I wouldn't have anywhere near the knowledge he has. That's the mind-blowing bit for me, really.
But lots of love in the chat room for that. Thanks, guys. Glad you enjoyed that. And as Nev said, we've got part 2 of that, haven't we, Nev? That's going to be back, or going to be on very soon as well, with more great chat with Nev and Ian. So keep your eyes peeled for that on the show. So Armando's not here, but he is here in a kind of virtual sense. So we have got some military news. I know Jonathan Warner is in the chat room, so
poised and ready.
He's poised and ready. So just for Jonathan Warner and all our military fans, Matt, press the button.
Blast up buggies 135, 50 Angels 16, heading 340. Okay. 108 buggies.
Our first military story is from flightglobal.com. It's about the Irish Air Corps receiving the first of 2 CASA, or what used to be CASA, C-295 maritime surveillance aircraft from Airbus Defence and Space. The first of these 2 aircraft touched down at Casement Aerodrome on the 27th of June. Now, this was acquired through what is approximately a $252 million US contract that was signed back in December of 2019, with the new aircraft replacing 2 CN-235s that are already in service with the Irish Air Corps. Now, this deal also covers the spare parts provision and some training in the aircraft. There was a statement from the Irish Department of Defense saying that these new aircraft are primarily equipped for maritime surveillance, particularly fisheries protection, but will also provide the Air Corps with the capability to deliver a range of services, including logistics support, troops and equipment, medical evacuation, air ambulance, search and rescue, and a general utility role. Ireland's lead C-295 appeared at the Paris Air Show earlier this month in Airbus's static display area. The second of these aircraft, according to Dublin, will be delivered a little bit later this year. Now, Dublin also last December ordered a single CN-295 in a tactical transport configuration for approximately 59 million euros. That aircraft will support tactical activities by special operations forces. That aircraft will be delivered in 2025. Now, Matt is hopefully showing some pictures of this beautiful, beautiful aircraft. I've actually flown on the Casa 235. I've never flown on a 295, but it's such an incredibly capable aircraft, being capable of flying into austere airfield. So its lineage goes back to the Casa 212. So it's a short takeoff and landing. It can do unimproved airstrips. It can do nighttime operations. But the best part about it, it's like a C-130 or an A-400, where it's got a ramp and door on the back that you can do quick insertions and extractions of personnel and equipment, as well as a parachute airdrop roll where you could potentially drop rescue supplies or resupply missions or even personnel out the ramp and door in the back. Again, hopefully you're seeing the pictures there. What a beautiful aircraft. I can't wait to one day see this airplane in person somewhere in Europe.
I mean...
It's like the C-295. I think me and Nick agree is like a baby Hercules. It's like someone's took the Hercules and kind of all of the kind of
and again for those that are listening rather than watching, whatever that was.
Yeah, they've stuck it on a 60-degree wash and then stood it in front of the fire.
Okay, right.
Yeah. But it's
an aircraft.
It's a great little bit of
nice.
Kit. It is a great little bit of kit.
Really nice with the winglets and I
yeah.
don't know. There's something about the kind of the windshield area on it. It's just
It's got a sort of corporate feel about it. Actually, looking at that,
corporate military.
Corporate military, yeah. I feel like that should be like, I don't know, instead of like, what do they call it? Is it Marine One, isn't it? When they move, from the airport to wherever. I feel like this. I suppose it hasn't got the sort of you still need a runway, I suppose, don't you? That's the only thing. But do you know what I mean? It's got that sort of feel about it. It sort of feels a bit quality. Yeah. Bit
of an upgrade, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Armando has got another one for us, and this particular one is from us from the warbirdsnews.com, and it's all about the National Museum of the USAF.
This next military story is from one of my favorite museums in the United States. This is the National Museum of the United States Air Force. The story is from warbirdnews.com, where the public is going to be invited to the National Museum of the United States Air Force to see 3 different World War II aircraft flown by the Commemorative Air Force during their Air Power History Tour. These aircraft are going to arrive on July 3rd and are going to feature the B-29 Superfortress Fifi, the B-24 Liberator, Diamond Lil, and a T-6 Texan, obviously a legendary trainer from World War II. All of these aircraft are going to be on static display to the public from July 4th, July 5th, from 9 to 5, both days. Aircraft crews are going to be able to talk to visitors. There are cockpit tours available for the B-29 and B-24. And of course, this is all subject to maintenance and weather. But in honor of the T-6 trainer flown by the Women's Air Service pilots, there's going to be some free guided gallery tours featuring women in aviation during this time period, taking visitors through the history of women in the Air Force from World War II to space exploration. The Air Force Museum put out a itinerary basically on Monday, July 3rd, Tuesday, July 4th, and Wednesday, July 5th, 9 to 5. There's going to be different activities with aircraft landing and then some of the tours that are available there. The B-29, B-24 squadron of the Commemorative Air Force brings together the aircraft, pilots, and crews from more than 70 different units across the country to create what is called the Air Power Squadron. That is an ever-changing assortment of military aircraft touring together to bring the sights, sounds, and smells of World War II aviation to audiences across the United States. Now in 2023, the National Museum of the United States Air Force is celebrating its 100th anniversary. Now, since 1923, this museum has grown from a small engineering study collection to the world's largest military aviation museum and is a world-renowned center for air and space, power technology, and culture preservation. You can find them at nationalmuseum.af.mil. It's friendly for all ages. I do believe it's free. I've been there a couple times. It's located on the grounds of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio. And it's free parking also inside the museum once you're there. In addition to seeing the B-24 and the B-29 and the T-6, there are more than 350 different aerospace vehicles, missiles, thousands of artifacts. There's a total of 19 acres of indoor exhibit space, with thousands and thousands of people going to this museum every year. One of my favorite parts of this museum is actually the executive transport, where they have numerous different Air Force Ones from over the years, and they're actually open to the public. You can come up into the aircraft and check them out. And of course, there's the usual suspects, SR-71s and all the fighter jets, all the way back to World War I, even fighters, I believe there. But anyway, go check out the National Museum of the United States Air Force. Search for them on the web, and then go check out some of these bombers on tour.
Case, I think, of wrong country, wrong time, because everything always seems to happen over in the US that's really good and has these amazing aircraft. The B-29 Super Fortress, or Fifi, as everyone knows, the aircraft, is one of those aircraft that I would love to personally see. I mean, we're lucky we've got obviously the Sally B, or Memphis Belle, the B-17 here in the UK at Duxford.
Although that's not flying now, is it?
Which it is. It's back in the air now. They got their certificate back last week.
Oh, did they? Oh, yeah. Fantastic.
We're lucky we can go and see that and pretty much stand right next to it and stuff. But the B-29 suit, Fifi, it's one of those aircraft. You've only got to Google Fifi, and it comes up, and it is a gorgeous, polished aluminium aircraft to see. And they're lucky. You guys over in the US are lucky to have that on your doorstep. But no, definitely good to go and see. If you're out in the US, go over to the museum on, as I said, on July the 3rd, on Monday, from 10 a.m. and go and get a chance to see all these aircraft. And if anyone is listening who is in the US and does get the chance to go over to the National Museum of the USAF on Monday the 3rd of July, get some pictures, send us something. We'd love to hear from you. All the details on where you can send that through coming up at the end of the show. Now, Armando's got one more to bring us on the military segment this week. It's from thedrive.com, and it's a very interesting one, this one. It's all about the history of aerial refueling celebrated by tankers flyovers across the US.
This last military story is from thedrive.com, one of my favorite sites. A century of aerial refueling is being celebrated by tanker flyovers across the United States. That's over 100 years ago. Over California, 2 U.S. Army Air Service crews passed a fuel hose between 2 aircraft, allowing one plane to be topped off by the other, opening up what was nothing short of a revolution in military flying. Now, that milestone, which was the first properly recorded practical air-to-air refueling, is marked this week by their successors, the tanker fleet of the United States Air Force, the most capable of its kind anywhere in the world. The service is honoring 100 years of aerial refueling excellence by flyovers taking place over 50 states with more than 80 tanker aircraft and 70 receivers. Participating tankers are, of course, the venerable KC-135 Stratotanker, the soon-to-be retired KC-10 Extender, and the latest still troublesome KC-46 Pegasus. The 6th Aerial Refueling Wing at MacDill Air Force Base is actually the oldest in the Air Mobility Command and is leading these celebrations. Now, as we know, tankers perform a vital, if sometimes unsung role, ensuring the rapid global reach for U.S. forces and allies, not only extending a range of wide variety of aircraft, but also enhancing lethality, flexibility, and versatility. At the same time, these tankers can also carry cargo, passengers, perform aeromedical evacuations, and they are increasingly taking on a number of other missions. Now, going back to the first two aircraft, they refueled for the first time on June 27th, 1923. Those two were some modified de Havilland DH-4 biplanes, which was a multi-purpose British design that was widely used in a range of roles by the U.S. military. At the controls were First Lieutenant Virgil Hine and First Lieutenant Frank Seifert, and the second aircraft was crewed by Captain Lowell Smith and First Lieutenant John Richter. These two aircraft first made contact 500 feet above Rockwell Field. That's San Diego's North Island. Seifert, in the rear cockpit of the first aircraft, delivered a rubber hose to Richter in the rear cockpit of the second aircraft. The tanker aircraft had both an extra 110-gallon fuel tank and a 50-foot metal-reinforced refueling tube that was lowered through a ventral trapdoor. Of course, over the years, we've seen many types of different aerial refueling systems, from looped hoses to straight hoses, drogue and probe systems, and then, of course, the most common, the flyable boom and receptacle is what we see today. Now, as far as the next 100 years of aerial refueling, that remains a question. Right now, we're working on the KC-46, of which the acquisition is still ongoing. The Pegasus is a traditional, non-stealthy, very non-stealthy, commercial derivative of a 767. Obviously, we keep talking about it, continues to suffer from some significant issues with, let's just call them key systems. But there's also the next generation aerial refueling system, or the NGAS, as the Air Force is calling it, just around the corner. NGAS, or NGAS, I suppose, is supposed to be able to provide support in what they're calling contested scenarios. That's something that tankers traditionally have avoided. Lockheed Martin and Boeing have already been exploring design concepts with blended wing bodies and some of these designs that are supposed to offer some degree of stealth to enhance their survivability. So whatever the future of the Air Force tanker fleet looks like, it's clear that these aircraft will continue to be an absolutely essential part in operations by the U.S. Air Force, by the Navy, by all of our allies that are using aerial refuelings. When, of course, with the need for more survivable tankers, there's also growing signs that the Air Force's next generation one is going to incorporate some elements, just as those visionary pilots did, 100 years ago over California. So there you go. Enjoy some of these pictures. Pretty cool to see the evolution of aerial refueling over 100 years.
It's one of those things when you see it done on YouTube. There's lots of videos on YouTube with air-to-air refueling. It is a blooming art to doing that job.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hats off to the guys and girls who do that, because very, very ingenious part of the Air Force, I tell you.
Not for me, personally.
Not for you, no. But thanks, Armando, for putting all those together for us, as always, this week, and the military segment. I know Jonathan Warner will appreciate that very much indeed. So it's time...
Hopefully not just Jonathan Warner, otherwise we should probably just do a special podcast for Jonathan Warner.
But, just for Jonathan Warner, exactly. Now, if you do like military aviation, don't forget to let us know.
Yeah.
Send us an email, details at the end of the show.
Yeah, Mr. Warner is short on friends. He needs,
Yeah. So it is time for Caption This. It's our time of the show where we have our picture that we publish on Facebook each Wednesday, and to give you guys and girls a chance to leave your most wittiest comments on. So Matt's going to pop up the picture on the screen, and Nev, for the benefit of those watching via audio podcast, what is this picture depicting?
Well, the engine cowling appears to be there, but the engine itself is missing from this aircraft, so you can see right through the whole thing. That's the summary of it, I would say.
So we've had lots of answers in, and we're going to kick off with...
Get your messages in the chat room, by the way. If you are watching on YouTube, then get your messages in the chat room. Carlos, here we go.
Yep, Neil says, in a new push to make air travel net zero, Airbus introduce hamster wheel propulsion.
James says it's called the Promise of Liftoff engine, or POLO for short. It's the engine with the hole in it. See what they did there? Nick?
Nick's got
next
Jake.
One is coming from Jake, and it's the new Mary Whitehouse engine. Suck, squeeze, bang, and blow were deemed too inappropriate.
Family show.
Family show, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank
family
you.
show.
James is getting all political with this answer. I like this one. Here we go. It's the Boris Johnson engine, lacking substance and full of wind.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's a bit dangerous.
Mark says, I know you said you've lost an engine, but...
Quite, absolutely. Yeah. It's how, like, everything's disappeared from it, isn't it? It's not just, it's not, there's no pipes, no nothing, just gone. Yeah.
Nick?
Next.
Yep, similar theme with the next one, actually. This one comes from Chris. Now then, boys and girls, this is the final test of the walk-around inspection. Let us know if you see anything amiss.
God, I think if they passed, I failed that, or Stuart says this engine is meeting net zero targets early.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Excellent. Good one.
Very good.
Paul says Dyson's contribution to next generation turbofans.
I knew somebody was going to go down the Dyson route. We've got loads in the chat room on the Dyson.
It's good. It's good.
Absolutely. We've all had that hairdryer, haven't we? We've seen that hairdryer and that fan.
Yeah.
I like this one because it's got a Star Trek twang to it. John says Rolls-Royce's new head of design denies that she has Klingon heritage with her environmentally friendly cloaking device.
Oh dear.
And finally, Nick, you can take this one if you want.
So this one's from Sturman. The village idiot buffoon Bill's latest solution against bird strikes.
I mean, it would cure the bird strikes issue.
Well, yeah, true.
And for the birds, it's going to be a lot more less painful.
Yeah.
Less splatty.
Quite. I don't know if they can get the technology to work. That's the issue, isn't it? Right. Okay. We'll go
to the chat room, Matt.
Yeah, we'll go to the chat room. So several in the chat room here. So I'm a three. I'm a three mugger grey fan. That was that's got nothing to do with this at all, is it? I picked up the wrong one there. Good news from Richard Adams. Anyway, as I say, Mazouz is going down the obvious route here. We've got the engine Dyson style, of course. It's Captain Ridiculous Wits is saying the calmest evacuation ever, as they realised there were no engines. I don't suppose it got in the air either, did it? We've got Mayman Micah says, Captain, for some reason it seems we lost thrust in the right engine. Not quite sure why. The next one, Captain Crew, zero emission right there. Unfortunately, also zero flight. Good point. Good point, well made. Richard Adams says they knew they shouldn't have diverted to Liverpool.
Oh,
I'm sure that's not true in any way, shape or form. Neil Lamwell says Dyson moves into engine manufacturing, fancy design, triple the cost. Yeah, ain't that the truth? Their fans are lovely, but they are like 3 times as much. As I say, sticking with the Dyson theme, Dirk S is saying the Dyson comment from Facebook is the only legit comment on this. He's saying, love that. We've got the new Dyson bladeless fan has been repurposed. And finally, Captain Ridiculous Wit says, when I said kill the third engine, I didn't mean completely eject it.
I mean, that is quite an interesting piece of engineering now, I will say.
Yes, indeed. If they could, I wonder if they could make it work. I wonder if they could make it work. Yeah.
We'll have Dyson on the show. I'm sure he'll do something.
Right. Okay,
so that is the caption list for this week. Thanks to everyone who's contributed to that. Thank you to everyone. Every Wednesday, we'll try and pop a picture up on our Facebook page. If you don't already follow us on there, more details on that at the end of the show. And next week, there'll be a fresh picture for you to leave your witty comments on. So, Nev, over to you for the book giveaway.
It's that time again, isn't it? Yes. So just before we come to the end of the show, I have a book to give away this week, which was this one, From Mons to Mali, by Andrew Thomas, 50 Extraordinary and Little-Known Vignettes of British and Commonwealth Airmen in Action since 1914. The question from last week was, in 1927, Charles Lindbergh was the first person to fly his aircraft, the Spirit of St. Louis, but across which ocean? And a lot of people got this right. Of course, the answer is the Atlantic Ocean. So in my special little bag here, I have all the correct answers. I shall draw one out at random. And let's see.
Oh, quick mention as well to Grub Street as well for
yes,
the books. Yeah,
excellent job from Grub Street. Thank you for supplying us with books continuously. Oh, and look who it is. Let's open that up so everybody can see it. This week's winner is John Pickard. Thank you very much indeed, John.
Oh, well done, John.
I'm going to send you.
Well done, Mr. Pickard.
And if you can reply with your postal address, I shall send that to you tomorrow. Now we've got this week's question. The prize this week is Cold Boys by Richard Pike. Previously unpublished tales of daring do from pilots and crew of the Lightning, Phantom, Hunter, Tornado and other aircraft. Ooh. Great read, actually. I had a quick flick through that earlier on, nearly 180 pages worth of stuff in there. And this week's question is, what is the fastest business jet currently in production? That's the key, currently. What is the fastest business jet currently in production? Send your answers to podcast@planetalkinguk.com and we'll draw the... I shan't be here next week, actually, so let's see if we might be able to hold that off for another week, perhaps. But if you
you've got a couple of weeks to get your answers.
Yeah. So it's podcast@planetalkinguk.com. What is the fastest business jet currently in production? Ooh. Good luck with your correct answers.
Google is your friend on this one, by the way. You are allowed to use it. Don't be afraid. Don't be shy. We'd rather
don't tell us.
Just don't tell us. Yeah, absolutely. We don't care. We want lots of people to get entered. Actually, while we're talking about ways to get in touch, let's whack through the socials then, if I may. If you want to contact us by WhatsApp number, it is +44 757 2249 That's +44 757 2249 That ends up directly in Carlos's sweaty palm. He'll give you all the details. Yeah, there we go. And so messages will go straight through to him. It's a great way of interacting with Carlos and the rest of us here on the team to find out more. Socials wise, all you need to do is search your chosen platform, Twitter, Facebook, and of course Instagram as well. You'll find us there under the tag of Plane Talking UK. Search your favourite social media platform for Plane Talking UK. Our email address, we'd love to hear feedback from you, by the way. Do please get in touch in all the usual ways for that. We'd love to hear from you in terms of any comments that you have, good or bad feedback. We love getting feedback from you as well. It's podcast@planetalkinguk.com. That's podcast@planetalkinguk.com. And of course, finally, don't forget our wonderful website where you can even go and purchase yourself a t-shirt or a military mug. Why not? It's www.planetalkinguk.com. That's www.planetalkinguk.com.
It's as easy as that. We'd love to hear from you. Really would love to hear from you with all your feedback. So quickly, we've got a few minutes before we finish the show. So quick round robin with what everyone is up to next week. We'll start with Nev. What's going on in the world of Mr. Bounds?
Oh, hectic next week. Down in Brighton for a couple of days at the office, doing some customer visits during the week. Then on Friday evening, I shan't be on the show next week, unfortunately.
What?
But I will be in the company of Captain Jeff and Captain Nick.
Oh, I see. Esteemed.
A place not too far from where I live here, so we're going to go up and see them, see how they're doing, as he's in town next week. So that'll be nice, and look forward to seeing Jeff. Haven't seen him for ages. That'll
Absolutely,
be,
yeah, definitely.
And Matt, what are you up to next week? Anything exciting?
No, I think it's a pretty quiet week actually. Just sort of romping up to sort of just work basically. I think that's about it really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Very boring, isn't it?
Very boring. How about you, Nick? Obviously, I know you've got a busy weekend planned.
Yep. Well, now I've finally got my car back after breaking down on the way back from Cosford. I'm going to whiz over to Portsmouth tomorrow and jump on the hovercraft and go over to the Isle of Wight. Go and see my son.
Oh, nice. Love
nice.
that. Yeah, love that.
Like that.
A very highly recommended form of travel, I have to say. So
Absolutely.
if you're ever in the Portsmouth area, I'd definitely recommend a little trip on the hovercraft.
Now, quickly, before we finish next week, Nev, we're off somewhere, aren't we?
Oh, yes, almost forgotten. Norwich Aviation Museum on Saturday of next week. We'll be taking the camera and Fluffy Mike with us, doing interviews at the Norwich, what's it called? Wings and
Wheels. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, Wings and Wheels, that's it. So that's going to be great, and we'll see our friend Carl up there, I guess, as well.
Hopefully.
Over in Norwich, which will be great. So if anybody's around at all next week...
Mazouz, if you all know you're in the chat room, he's one of our local listeners in Norwich. Mazouz will be there. So if you are in the Norwich area next Saturday, get yourselves over to the City of Norwich Aviation Museum. We would love to see you there. Me and Nev will be there, as Nev said, with the Fluffy Mike. So that is where we're going to bring episode 462 to a close of the Plane Talking UK podcast. Big thanks to Nick for putting lots of good stories in for us this week. Thanks to Matt for doing everything wonderful in the studio. Thanks to Nev, as always, for his great contribution to the show and also the book stuff. And also thanks to Armando for all the military news segments he sent in this week. Thank you to you as well. He's very busy, bless him. But hopefully he'll be back at some point very soon. So from me, Carlos, here in the home studio, from Matt in the P2K Master Suite studios, from Nev, we'll miss you next week, Nev, and from Nick as well. Have a great weekend, whatever you're up to. Stay safe, fly safe, and we'll see you next Friday on the show. Take care, everyone. Say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.